You're listening to the Art of Making Home podcast with Sandro Stefanucci of Abstract Homes. He is a builder with over 37 years of experience in the industry. This series shows you the construction industry from the contractor's perspective. In addition, we will be discussing challenges that we have encountered and what other industry professionals can learn from those stories. We'll be covering such topics that many people do not consider before building, like what your property can allow. Is your property located on a steep hill? What will your municipality enable you to construct? It might not be as cut and dry as you think. So let's get the conversation started.
Hello, beautiful people. It's Sandro Stefanucci here from Abstract Homes and Renovations. So glad that you could join us today on our podcast. And just so you know, we here at Abstract Homes, we just really want to inform the homeowner and people that are not always in construction. We have a real passion for knowledge and that you can make the right decisions or more informed decisions when you're thinking about renovating or building. And today we have Kathy Yuen on our podcast from Phase One Designs. She's been in the business for 17 years now. And the topic today, we're going to talk about a few things, but really the interaction between architect and builder. There's some key components to that I really want to kind of dig into a little deeper with Kathy. But I just want to get Kathy maybe to explain or just tell us a little bit more about yourself, Kathy, and your background in the architectural world. And is there a design philosophy you have? Is there something that you guys really stick to, like a core value of one that you would really want to kind of people to know about?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So first of all, thank you, Sandro, so much for having me today. Super excited for the chat we're going to have. So like you mentioned, my name is Kathy Yuen. I'm the founder and owner of Phase One Design. We are an architectural and interior design firm here in Greater Vancouver. Design philosophy. So from a design philosophy standpoint, I always say design is so much more than design. So design has to be holistic and it has to encompass a lot more than just design as it relates to home design. So for example, we as designers need to consider things like the functionality of the home, the aesthetics, of course, but then also things like the design budget, the constructability of it, the energy efficiency. So there's just so much more to design than just design.
Yeah, it's great, Kathy. So why don't we talk about interaction? So me as a builder, you as a designer, from your opinion and from what your experience is, collaboration, I've talked about it on other podcasts in regards to working with a builder like sooner than later. Right? Which a lot of people don't. And I'm sure for you typically you'll get people that call you and, oh, hey, I want to design, I'm building a home or I'm doing this renovation, whatever it may be. And I need somebody to design it for me and stuff like that. So they're not necessarily thinking, oh, you know what, I need to get a builder involved with this and then maybe how about a mechanical contractor or building envelope engineer, like they don't think about those kinds of things. So maybe just talk a little bit about your process and how you like to see that role.
Yeah, absolutely. So you nailed it, Sandro. I mean, obviously, when one of the first things when you think about designing and building a house is, well, first of all, it's super exciting, right? So everybody usually comes in and, excited and saying, okay, well, yeah, let's get the process started and, let's jump into design, which naturally that sounds like the very first step that you would do. And yes, it is. However, it is so much more than that, as you've alluded to. So yes, the design part is the first part of the process, but what's equally important is bringing in the right team and not after you're done design, but to help inform the design. So one of the key people that should be in the room is the builder. So someone such as yourself can help, guide the conversation. One of the very first things that we always talk about, for example, is budget. So budget is one of those things that, a lot of people feel maybe uncomfortable about talking about. At the very beginning, they don't really want to tell you what the budget is, but it's quite frankly one of the most important things to discuss at the onset of the project. So, as a designer, obviously we come to the table with a lot of experience and, I always like to start conversations with, what is your construction budget? And either I'll get an answer with an actual number or oftentimes somebody will say, well, I actually have no idea where to start, which is okay. That's totally fine. But it's just a conversation that needs to be had. So, as a designer, again, we can help guide those conversations, but it's equally as important to like bring in a builder and say, okay, well, is this budget realistic? Like, what are the things that are going to affect the budget? And then together, the design and build team can help take that budget, whatever it may be. And if it's realistic, then yes, we can move forward to the next step. Or if it's not, then we can actually adjust course and like adjust the design, whether it's like the square footage. There's lots of different things that we can do together collectively to make sure that the project is set up for success from a like financial standpoint.
Right. Yeah. And, a lot of people don't know that if you get the guys involved, say like a builder, mechanical contractor, building envelope engineer on this product, your initial upfront cost, say, a couple of grand for me to consult on the project, a couple of grand from your mechanical engineer, a couple of grand from a building envelope engineer, some key guys that are in there. Your upfront cost might be, a little bit more, but I think that money is I know it's well spent because you'll get closer to what you want within the budget that you want. Now, assuming that your budget is in line with what your expectations are, right? So I think you can bring it down quite easily and kind of get that budget number dealt with fairly early in the process, because you really can't, again, being honest about, what the costs are, I think, and not fudging it. I've seen it happen so many times where, prices, they're not necessarily, there's always budget overruns, a lot of times only because the client mightn't have gotten a proper number to begin with.
Yeah. Well, and you bring up a really good point, Sandro. So like literally the very first meeting that, but let's just say a client calls, very, very first call, we've never had a conversation before. That's one of my first questions is like, what is the budget? And then and no one's going to know at that point in time, right? Because obviously you don't have a design. Nobody knows how big the house is going to be, what it's going to look like, all these different factors. But like at the very least, just talking about I call it a low high budget range. And then it's always good to bring in the builder to be like, okay, yes, that's realistic. No, it's not. And then so that would be like step one. And then step two would be like, once we actually start design, having the builder at the table, like you say, Sandro. And like the thing is, too, with the way that buildings are built these days, and even homes, for those out there who haven't heard of step code as an example, they basically a step code is building code that is and has been rolling out over the last several years and will continue to roll out in different phases. We won't get into that today, but essentially where I'm going with this is that it's making buildings and homes a lot more complicated and sophisticated to build. So even more important to have everybody at the table up front, so that, we can factor any of those special construction methodologies, for example, and special ways of building a house into the design at the very beginning. So you're not, finish the design, you fall in love with it. And then, we pass a set of drawings to the builder. And then it's like, oh, by the way, all these things are missing, or, we're over budget. So we never ever want to be in a scenario like that. Hence, like having everybody at the table at the very beginning. And I'm sure you've seen that, Sandra, where people, homeowners call you and say, oh my gosh, I finished the design and here's a set of drawings, and they pass you a set of drawings that's fully finished and they spent months on the set of drawings and tons of money. And then you have to be the bad guy coming and breaking the bad news that it's over budget, right? Like I've heard this horror story more times than not.
Yeah, it happens actually more often than I like to, talk about. That's another reason why I'm doing all these podcasts too, so people can really, again, if they don't know, they don't know. So we just try to inform people and get them more knowledgeable about the process and those things that influence, your decision on buying or what it's going to actually really cost, instead of having your, one of your friends tell you, oh yeah, you can do it for this or you can do that. We did a pretty big gut on a 105-year-old home. And their friends are telling, well, you can lift the house in the weekend, and and it won't cost that much to lift the house. I'm just shaking my head. You know what I mean? Though, like there's just crazy stuff out there. You've probably heard it all too. We are dealing with the step code, like you said, and now we're getting the demands for this energy. Like the increase in energy conservation really is what it is. And we're having to deal with these step codes. What have you noticed as far as your clients that you've dealt with in that realm of energy efficiency? Do they really know what it is when you're talking about step code? Has anybody informed them about the step code? The implications on, say, the cost? Because as you know, the more intricate your design gets, the harder it is for the builder to detail. So having an architect, obviously like yourself, that knows that and conveying that to homeowner up front, it might change. I think because a lot of people might have their mind set up on a particular design that they want, all these fancy corbelling and these wall details, and you got so many intersections and roof lines that are all over the place, and increasingly we have to stop, kind of designing buildings that way, in my opinion, and start simplifying it, and then look for architectural details that won't, affect like thermal bridging and stuff like that. So anyways, what have you noticed in the recent about those kinds of things as far as the energy code goes?
Sandra, that's a really good question. And that's honestly a really tricky one because, quite frankly, in my experience, what we've been seeing is, homeowners that are, unless you're in the industry, number one, like most homeowners are like, what is step code? You may have heard it in the news or something like that. And even if you do understand, it's a building code requirement, it is quite complex to, explain and really understand and wrap your head around, like if you're not doing this day to day, like you and I, right? So there's that side of it. So I really think a lot of it is education. But that being said, I mean, even just going to a homeowner and educating them to say, okay, well, here are all the requirements, but then here's how that overlaps with what you want. So like, your example of having a very simple building form, which on one side, designing an efficient building and getting into like really energy efficient, high performance homes, that's the best way to do it. It's very simple building forms. But then, we as designers, a homeowner may come to us with a very, very elaborate home design that they want that is not energy efficient and would be a little bit more challenging to meet the code, but that's what they want. So trying to bring those two things together. And then, like you mentioned, there's the whole budget aspect to that. So that emphasizes like how important it is that you need to have everybody around the table at the very beginning, because, from a homeowner's perspective, too, quite honestly, like most homeowners, like they don't, I would say in my experience, they're interested in knowing, okay, yeah, of course, everybody wants their home energy efficient and everything like that. But do they really want to deep dive into like energy calculations and all the technical data? No, they don't. But if you have like the right experts at the table, we can give them enough information in order to make an informed and educated decision, but without overwhelming them with all this like technical data. And doing it at the very onset to set realistic expectations too, I think is super important because, like a lot of house building, as you know, Sandro, is about setting expectations, right? I think like homeowners, they want to have realistic expectations too, right? Like coming in, is my budget realistic? Is my timeline realistic? Obviously, every house needs to meet code. So is what they want realistic to code? So that is a tricky answer or a question to answer in terms of like what we're seeing. But I think we're going to see challenges with, just educating homeowners from that aspect. But, one that is quite easy to conquer this challenge, literally just by having the right experts around the table that are savvy at, what's coming down the pipeline for building code and energy code, and then being able to like deliver that information and give homeowners proper information without overwhelming them and helping them to make proper decisions.
Right. Having said that, are you finding that you are more insistent on having, say, at least the builder at the table right from the onset?
One of our first questions is also like, have you engaged a builder? And let's just say like when a homeowner first comes to us, and we're having initial conversations, if they come back and say, no, I'm looking online or whatever, like we as designers will always help facilitate like an introduction to like someone like yourself. And then I think a lot of homeowners sometimes are nervous about like engaging a builder too early because, they feel like they might have to like sign a contract and get like really committed. But I will say, and I don't want to speak on your behalf, Sandro, but I think like even in your process, what you guys do is you have a process where like you will work together with a homeowner at the very beginning without having to sign like a full-blown construction contract, right? Is that how you guys operate?
Yeah, we talked about that process earlier, and it is, So, say somebody wanted to hire us at the beginning of a project, just for input consultation. I would call it more of a consultation type of role, where no, you're not going to be committed. If you want to use another builder later on, then you're more than welcome to do that. But I would charge, obviously for my time and doing that. And there's no obligation to use this as a builder, but just because I know that it's important that you need to have somebody that can guide you, in the process, and especially like, again, it's always, budget is always a concern. So, and to keep you into that range, and again, your budget's got to be realistic, and that once you've got that out of the way, and together we collaborate and we make sure that we can keep that within the budget with using the finishes and the materials. Well, yeah, no, you can't use that tile from Italy that's going to cost you $50 a square foot. You might have to go to $10 a square foot. Those kinds of things that can bring you back down to earth and do that. So I think that's great.
Like, I think definitely money well spent. 100%. Like, I've seen it done so many different ways. I mean, like, over the years, we've designed like literally hundreds of homes, and like in different scenarios and different setups. And I will say, like, we have seen the most successful projects where a builder is engaged early on. Like you mentioned, Sandra, like whatever investment you have to make up front, like even if it's like, X amount of hours that you're hiring the builder, that money will pay itself off like tenfold. Like it's a drop in the bucket. I think the other thing too, that why I think that's very successful in my experience is I always kind of joke, it's like dating before you get married, right? So you would never just like wake up and like marry someone the next day. So like the analogy would be, okay, you're not, instead of just going out and like hiring a builder after, maybe a couple phone interviews, face-to-face interviews, engaging a builder to be part of the design process gives you as a homeowner the opportunity to see how they operate, how they communicate, see if you guys, trust each other, like if there's that relationship there, or do you want to like in the future hire them for a full construction contract? And then like you said, if for some reason something is going sideways, or you're not feeling comfortable, then, at the very least, yes, you maybe invest some money up front here for, to the consultation piece, but then at least you're not fully engaged. And then, oh my goodness, like now I'm stuck with this builder through construction. I know this probably doesn't happen with you. I think also what it allows the homeowner to do is see that dynamic of the builder working with the rest of the team as well.
Right.
Because the reality is between your design and the construction of your home and the permits and, that whole process, I mean, start to finish, depending on the project, of course, but, we're talking like 1 to 2 years, in some cases, like even longer. In many cases, you have relationships that last even longer than that because, you become friends with your clients, but my point is, you want to make sure you have the right team that you can actually work with as a homeowner, but also that the team members around the table, they actually interact well and work well together. Because you want to just make sure you have the right people around the table.
Again, it's a fit, and that's an easy way, it's an inexpensive way to see if you actually fit. And I think it goes for everybody else too, right? Because, not everybody is necessarily a fit for us or you. And, it's not something personal. It's what it is. But this is a great way to find out what that builder is like. Everybody's heard the horror stories, so this is a good way to make yourself at ease and get a peace of mind, I think, in that. So I do want to talk a little bit also about how a designer and builder interact in the, actual process of building, right? And I know that we've dealt with many different architects and so forth. How does that process when you're specifically doing it? I think people, I would like to know that, because if they're getting charged an X amount of dollars, they don't necessarily know that there's care after the design's done, right? There's care that needs to be taken care of after, is it being designed the way we designed it? Is a builder working with me to make sure that we're getting the closest to what that thought or that hope or dream vision of that product is going to look like, that, people that don't know, they don't know. So maybe tell us a bit about that.
First of all, I'm a really, really strong believer in getting as much of the planning and design done as possible, to the point where I would say 100% of the planning done before you even start construction. So what I mean by that is, you want to know, obviously, like your architectural design drawing should be fully complete, like as detailed as possible. You should have a full-blown set of interior design drawings, very, very detailed. What that allows you, Sandro, like someone like yourself, to do in construction is it's really just about executing that, right? So a homeowner is not standing on site trying to make decisions on the fly. That is a very dangerous and slippery slope to go down, because if let's just say if you were not to make those decisions and have everything fleshed out before you start construction, then number one, it obviously makes construction harder and way more stressful. And secondly, you don't really know what your budget is, right? Like if you're standing on site trying to pick materials, you're number one under a time crunch. And number two, like you're like, okay, well, where am I at budget wise? And like you could be over budget and like not even know that. So like your design drawings, like I mentioned, and your budget should all be pretty like dialed in before you even start construction. And recognizing that, most of the projects that you and I are involved in, Sandro, are custom. So 100% things are going to change on site, and that's normal. But as much as possible, the planning should be done before construction starts. Now, that being said, to answer your question, during construction, there should be a team, the design team. So the design team being the architectural and the interior design should definitely support the process, although recognizing and respecting that, the construction team and the builder is there to kind of like take the lead on obviously the construction side of things. Obviously, if there's like a question or a clarification or something like that, your design team should be readily available to come and provide that type of support. Most of the time, especially more so on the interior design side, there are some key milestones during the process where the team should be coming out on site, collaborating with the builder and in many cases the homeowner for, like site related items. So for example, like the electrical walkthrough, right? We would plan out in advance where, like all your lighting fixtures go and where everything goes like on paper, on a plan. But then at some point you would actually have the design team go out and actually do a walkthrough on site, like after it's built. So everybody knows exactly where that's going. And then usually that gets marked out on site. And usually the homeowner is part of that process as well, depending on the project. So I think the collaboration throughout the construction process is definitely something that, when you're interviewing designers and builders, you should just make sure that like that's cohesive as well.
Right. So again, it's through the whole process that you guys are involved with. I see other projects where other architects may not be so eager to come to the site and I say, hey, you know what, we got nowhere else to run this pipe, and now it's in the way of that. With your pot lights, I can't put the pot lights where you wanted to put the pot lights. We're going to be off center. So having somebody like yourself that, okay, we can deal with that. We come there, look at it and deal with those kinds of issues right away. Having said that, and being around long enough that, there is a difference in even pricing. So people that don't know even what a set of plans would cost, and we don't do the same project over and over again. So you have a fixed cost on your price. But those types of things, and people need to know that you have to pay for to get the service that you need. You're going to pay probably a little bit more, but it's going to save you in the end, which I don't think people understand a lot. So having said that, I think, is that something that you guys that are, say you have a client, you don't have a builder coming to you, you got a homeowner that doesn't know any different. What's the process for you to explain that, this is how we do things here and this is why we do things here? Do you find that it's important and that the clients are appreciative of that fact? Because, I know that you're not the cheapest out there and people can get plans done for a lot less, but you're going to have problems. You're going to have the builder phoning you 1,000 times asking, what did you think about this? And how come there's no dimensions or there's... Yeah, no, and you know what, I'm just kind of laughing because, and it's like not funny, but we do a lot of what's called I call them takeover projects where, unfortunately there are also horror stories in the design world where, somebody will come to us and say, oh my gosh, we paid like X amount of dollars for a set of plans, which, it's not an insignificant amount of money, but way less than what our fees would be. And then, there's some nightmare story of how it was like way over budget or like the design doesn't work or, the drawings are insufficient or, but there's a laundry list of things. And yeah, like unfortunately you have to start over again with drawings like that. And there is definitely value in investing in a set of plans. So, and as you alluded to, every project is different. So our fees and then every designer fees are different depending on the project. But what I always say is like what you spend on drawings is an investment. And I think it's for lots of different reasons. But the like very basic reason even, let's just look at one, your budget as an example. So as you can probably support, Sandro, like if you are in construction and let's just say if you misbudgeted something, and not because you misbudgeted it as a builder, but let's just say that something was wrong with the plans or something was missed or you just didn't do the plans at all, or like you didn't do a proper set of specifications, it's very easy to just burn through and waste like tens of thousands, if not like hundreds of thousands, like six figures of money, right? It's like, oh, we made this mistake. Now we have to do this to fix it. And then, of course, now you're like, like using your example of the pipe. Okay, so that should never happen. Actually, like I would say kind of back to what we were talking about before, having the right people around the table at the beginning, we should already know where that pipe was supposed to go. And we should already know it's not supposed to be there because there's supposed to be a pot light there. But using that example, no, now we have to change the framing. How much does that cost? Maybe we have to change the structural engineering. How much does that cost?
Oh, and by the way, after all of that, you just spent all this extra money. That was really stressful. It took up a bunch of your time. And you might still end up with a design that, you end up with like a pot light in like a weird location where you didn't really want it to, or like a weird bulkhead. So now you're getting an inferior product. So, and like mistakes like that can easily add up to the tens of thousands of dollars. It's not like six figures, right? So in my opinion, whatever you invest up front is completely worth it on the back end. Like you can pay off those fees easily.
And again, it's just finding the right people, finding the right team, to do the follow through and to get you the best product possible. And I know you guys do that. Kathy, we talked about so much good stuff here. We could keep on talking forever, but I think we got to stop there. We can do another podcast at another time. I just want to thank you for being on our podcast. It's great to have you. So everyone, this is Kathy Yuen from Phase One Designs. Now, if someone wanted to get a hold of you, Kathy, what's your email?
My email is Kathy@phase1design.ca. So it's Kathy with a K at phase1design, all spelled out, .ca.
Thank you again, Kathy, for joining us. And everybody out there listening, follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks again. Take care.
Thank you so much for listening to another episode of The Art of Making Home with Sandro Stefanucci from Abstract Homes. Make sure you keep following every episode to learn his advice about the building industry here in the Lower Mainland. He will have great tips on following episodes when it comes to building or renovating your home. Make sure to follow us on Spotify, Google Podcasts, and of course, Apple Podcasts so you don't miss his latest construction advice. If you want more information on Abstract Homes, all you have to do is go to their website, abstracthomes.com. Talk to you next time.